Okay, so let's get into the class. First thing I want to do, since it's been a couple of weeks, we're going to go back and I'm going to recap on the way to acquire tahara, or purity. Basically, we learned in chapter 17, physical and spiritual activities have distinct paths to tahara. The way to acquire purity of intent in physical activity is to contemplate the lowly nature of the worldly pleasure. This will lead one to be repulsed by the involvement in such pleasures and will free one to focus on the service of Hashem, even in the mundane actions. So the idea is to keep one's focus pure in spiritual activities. One must contemplate the emptiness of honor and fleeting nature, train yourself to avoid it. Then, when performing mitzvah, one will concentrate only on the true source of our praise to Hashem. So one of the most valuable things that we learned, which I think that to acquire tahara or purity this is a task here. This is the task. Because you are basically taking the next level that says that there are things in my life and physicality that there are not sins, there's nothing wrong with doing. But because I've seen the folly in the activity, what's the point? It's not leading me close to Hashem. And that's hard. That's a tough one because it's not a sin. And at the same time, we are told by the Ramchal that a person who restrains or restricts themselves from things that are not sinful, if they do it not for the sake of heaven, but they do it for the adulation of man, then it's really a sin. But what would be the point of trying to do that? So it's very difficult to acquire this. I really do believe it's very difficult. However, it is possible to do it, but it takes one thinking very seriously about the lowliness of worldly pleasures and put it in its category and avoiding them if they do not bring ourselves closer to Hashem. Now, we're going to be in chapter 18, the trait of Hasidus, or piety. Now, starting right off the bat here, the Ramchal chooses to use the word Hasidus, and the problem is translating that into English. Piety is really not a good word. What do we think of when we think of piety? Think of a person that it appears to be real pious, right? They talk real gentle and they carry themselves with piousness, or a religious person. But Hasidus is really much more in depth than just that simple word piety. So we're going to try to go through a little bit of elaboration on the whole idea. The trait of Hasidus truly requires a thorough clarification, because many practices and many approaches pass among many people under the name of Hasidus, when in fact they are nothing but crude forms of Hasidus, lacking form, shape, or refinement, and they are not authentic Hasidus. Now, when we think of Hasidus today, we're thinking of the guys with the strummels and the black hats and the piles, right? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a totally different level of Hasidus. Why is there such a profound misunderstanding of Hasidus? Misunderstanding results from a lack of examination and real insight on the part of those who adopt the practices. For they have not made an effort nor toiled to know the way of Hashem. And the way of Hashem, it's the word derech. Have you heard this word? One has left the derech or fallen off the derech. My parents used to use the term, but we didn't realize it's a Hebrew term meaning the pathway. They went off the pathway. Have you heard the term? They've fallen off the derech, right? Well, that means they have actually left the path. So the idea is the person has failed to really toil and understand this idea. The path of Hashem wants us to, what the path of Hashem wants us to do and to follow, with a clear and sound understanding. Instead, they aimlessly act piously according to whatever occurred to them at first thought, and they did not plumb the depths of these matters, nor did they weigh them on the scales of wisdom. So let me explain what this is saying. What this is talking about is a person who conducts themselves in a pious manner. They do religious things. They restrict themselves, but they never look and explore the depth of this and the spirituality behind it, the understanding behind it. Just go through the motions of doing it. The example, eating food and saying a blessing, a bracha. We're told when you actually go to say the bracha to really concentrate, to pause before you put the food in your mouth and concentrate on what you're doing. You're actually blessing Hashem for the offering that you're getting ready to put on the altar of your life. And it's a beautiful thing. It reckons back to the temple, etc. It has so many deep meaning, such deep meaning. If one just says the blessing and he does not do it with the sincerest depth of spirituality, can you shut that door for me? That they will miss out on actual what it is to be a genuine pious person. Not only have these people distorted the practice of Chassidus for themselves, they have also caused other people to reject it. For example, have you been around someone that is quite religious but not very spiritually savvy? This is what we're talking about. And a person that's deep in piety, yet they don't have the connection and the knowledge of spirituality and Hashem and the real sake of heaven idea behind it, it turns people off. Because people are like, I don't have anything to do with that. I mean, they're just religious and pious for piety's sake and not for the sake of heaven. And there's nothing more nauseating than a religious person with no spirituality, no sense of purpose behind what they're doing. And those people are fairly easy to find. Alas, what the Ramchal calls pseudo-Hasidim have sold the image of Hasidus in the eyes of the masses, including even some intelligent people. Here's the example. I was in the Haredi community in Jerusalem, and it was Shabbos, and we're coming out of the shul, and a taxi drives down the road. Yes, and while he's driving down the road, individuals are picking up everything from egg cartons to sticks and throwing it at the vehicle, going, "It's Shabbos! It's Shabbos!" You know, screaming and hollering. I understand their frustration behind the whole thing, but an Arab taxi driver is not obligated for Shabbos. But yeah, he's not the enemy, and so the whole thing is it just doesn't look good. It doesn't look good. I understand the passion to restrain yourself and have a peaceful community, but that just goes over the top. And so, what does that look like to the person who's the taxi driver? He sees that person as just a dead religious individual, and that's what we're talking about.
Act of rebellion, because by now people know not to.
Of course, it's probably an act of rebellion. You know that, but at the same time, what's the point? Does it get you anywhere? Right? That's what we're talking about. And I like he called it pseudo Chesidim. Let's go on, and he says they believe that the entirety of Chesedus is predicated solely upon the recitation of many supplications and lengthy confessions, upon extravagant bouts of weeping and prostrations, and upon bizarre acts of self-affliction, which one almost kills himself. Do you remember seeing over Pesach the Christians in Manila were hanging themselves on the cross and flailing themselves with I mean, it's a bloody mess. It's terrible. Pious people have been known to immerse themselves only in ice cold water You know, matter of fact, I am like allergic to cold water. I cannot stand. I have a pool. I love my swimming pool, but if it's not warm, I'm not getting in the water, right? And so there are people who feel like, well, the best way to mikvah is to mikvah yourself and inflict yourself, right? So you go dip in ice cold water every time you do it. Those pseudo Hasidim do not realize that although some of these things are necessary for penance to achieve full atonement, there are sometimes you have to afflict yourself. What would be an example of a normal affliction that you should put on yourself if you've sinned, done something really naughty? Fasting. It's a perfect way. Restrict yourself in some way. And especially if part of your sin was something that you should get out, quit doing, whatever it may be, you cut that out of your life. It may not be a sin, but that led to the sin. You should just cut it out of your life. And some of our appropriate measures for perushim, or practice of perishus, in order to distance themselves from a sin. We just said that. Nevertheless, chassidus is not founded upon these practices at all. So chassidus in piety is not about afflicting yourself. It's not about punishing yourself. It's not about restricting yourself. Rather, the best of these practices is worthy of complementing the practice of chassidus. However, the essence of chassidus itself is very profound matter, requiring intensive study in order to correctly understand it. It is said that a person can never, ever achieve chassidus unless he becomes a Torah scholar. Right? Now, why does he say that? It doesn't mean that a person cannot achieve chassidus by their lifestyle. What he's saying is a person who's really wanting to know, to search the depths of Torah law and mitzvah, you have to know the Torah. You have to study the law. It is founded upon the principles of immense wisdom and upon absolute refinement of one's conduct. And as such, it is fitting for everyone who is wise of heart to pursue it, for in fact, only the wise can truly attain it. As the sages of blessed memory have stated in Avos 25, an arrogant person cannot be a chassid, a practitioner of chassidus. So then what is authentic chassidus? Now we can explain this matter in an orderly fashion, which the Ramchal does an excellent job at. The root of chassidus is encapsulated in our sages of blessed memory, what they refer to in Brachos 17a. He says, fortunate is he whose toil is in the Torah and brings satisfaction to his Creator. The Ramchal elaborates the idea that chassidus essentially means to bring satisfaction to Hashem as follows. See, the mitzvot that are incumbent upon all of Israel are already known, and then extend to their obligation is similarly known. However, one who loves the Creator, blessed be His name, with genuine love, will not endeavor to aim to absolve himself of his obligations to Him by merely complying with that which is already widely known, an obligation upon all of Israel. Rather, what will occur with him is that which occurs with a son who genuinely loves his father, namely that if his father so much as subtly imply that he desires a certain thing, the son with a loving kindness just does what he's supposed to do. This, my friend, is the reason why many people in the B'nai Noach community at some level are chassid, right? They are pious because they love Hashem, and they're not obligated to do anything more than the Sheva Mitzvot. And yet, they love Hashem so much, they want to please Hashem by doing other mitzvahs, giving charity, Shabbos, etc., the way you eat, your blessings over your food. All these things are wonderful mitzvahs you do, and that's what makes a person a chesed. It's not the way you dress, though it could be, because modesty is important, but it's understanding the depths of your love for Hashem. We continue on, and it says, yeah, here's another idea. A son that loves his father is not going to wait for instructions to do something. It's just going to do it because it needs to be done, right? It's that attention to detail.
But you understand the principle behind the commandment.
Right.
You understand, well, even though the commandment doesn't say do this, the principle
behind
I do this.
Absolutely, 100%. As a matter of fact, that's how we know the essence and the character of Hashem is through the Torah laws. That's how we discover who He really is, because other than that, He has no form. He's not a man. He's not given us a detailed description of who He is. He's quite mysterious, right? But the Torah law gives us exactly who He is. He is the Torah, right? So if that's the case, we begin to so intimately relate to Hashem that at some level it just clicks. As a matter of fact, what you'll find is without knowing the Torah law, without knowing the specific Torah instance of where the sages pronounce what should be done or not should be done, when you are intimate with Hashem, you can pretty much figure it out. That's a no-brainer. I know better. That's something you shouldn't do, right? This phenomenon is true of any loving relationship, husband and wife, even a relationship with your employer. Now, this phenomenon is something that we can observe with our own eyes as occurring at all times between loving friends, between a man and a wife, between a father and a son, in short, between any two people whose love for each other is truly strong. Have you, and you probably know this if you have somebody that you're close to, or a spouse or your sister, you can almost predict what they would like. You don't have to go to them and ask them, hey, would you want me to pick you up a coffee? Or whatever it may be. You automatically just know this is them. They will really like this, and I'm going to do it. It's also about endearing yourself to the other person. So in many ways, chassidus is a chesed is one who endears himself to or herself to the heart of Hashem at all times. That's the whole goal, just to endear yourself to the heart of Hashem. You just want to do whatever it takes to please Him. A person who loves Hashem in this way will have the same attitude. Now, this same phenomenon will also occur to one who loves his Creator in sincere love, for he too is in the ranks of those who love. To him, the mitzvos, whose directives are revealed and widely known, will merely be revelations of Hashem's broader intent. Much what Sandy was talking about. To recognize that His will and desire, blessed be His name, tend toward the matter, and then having determined Hashem's general intent, He will say, it is not enough for me to do what is explicitly stated, but I have to make sure I go above and beyond the call of duty. Can we think of some things like that that are in Torah Judaism? There's a lot of things. How about building a fire? Right? We found out there's a kosher light switch that's getting ready to come out. Right? Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Yeah, it's 100% kosher. It's the way it's randomly set up. There's no circuits that are completed by the process. It's genius. But the idea is, you can be like a Karaite that says, well, Hashem says build no fire, so we just don't build a fire. It has nothing to do with lights and computers, etc. So I can do everything else, just don't build a fire. Don't light a fire. Well, the idea is we understand the intent, what Hashem is talking about, creative order, creative, creative activities, right? Creative activities is literally, the intent is we understand Hashem says that you're not to build a fire, which translates out to your labors, which translates out to what is done on the Shabbos that is creative, right? We don't sit and write with a pencil on Shabbos because it's creative labor, right? But there's nothing wrong with studying and reading, right? Turning pages of books because you're studying the Torah. So you know Hashem's intent and you go above and beyond all that. Rather, to the contrary, he will say, since I have already discovered and observed that Hashem's desire, blessed be his name, is inclined toward this manner, it will serve as a guide for me to do more in this matter and to expand upon it in every possible way that I can determine that Hashem's will, blessed be he, desires. This type of person is referred to as one who brings satisfaction to his Creator. The practical definitions of Chassidus based on the above, it thus emerges that the guiding principle of Chassidus, expanding the fulfillment of all the mitzvahs in all appropriate feasible scenarios and applications. So in the light above, the Ramchal explains this parallel of Chassidus and Parashus, which he mentioned in chapter 13. Now you can see that Chassidus is of the same sort as Parashus, or abstinence, meaning, yes, this is lawful, I can do it, but I abstain from it. A person who is a chesed says this is what God says to do, and here are the restrictions, but I'm going to add some additional restrictions upon myself as a measure to please Hashem more. When you go to Israel, there are different hechshers. It's all kosher, but there are certain hechshers from a certain rabbi that only certain people eat. Yes.
Pictures? I don't know that term.
Like the kosher, you know how you see a kosher sign?
Yeah, that's what they're called. The sign?
Right, that's what they're called, yeah. I'm sorry, yes. But it can be kosher, but if it's not got the stamp of a certain rabbinical oversight, they won't touch the food. And it's not because it's not kosher. So like when Rabbi Greenbaum's going to go buy meat, for example, he's looking for a special sign from a specific rabbinical decision. And that's the meat that he buys. And there are others in the Haredi community that buys the other kind. Why? Because they've chosen to put the restrictions over themselves at a higher level. That's it. It doesn't make them a better human being. It just says that they are living a pious life that says, this is what Hashem says. It needs to be kosher. It needs to be butchered properly. But I'm going to only buy meat that has been under this level of restriction. And it's not like one of the highest levels of restriction. Let me read this. In summary, the essence of Chassidus is bringing satisfaction to Hashem through discerning His will and striving to fulfill it in the most complete way. In practice, this means to observe the mitzvot in a manner that broadens their scope so that they are performed with depth and applied to every relevant aspect of our lives. Thus, a parush or practitioner of parashus views an explicit prohibition as an expression of Hashem's distaste for the activity and will therefore seek to distance himself not only from it, but from anything similar to it. So here's some examples. It's a sin to commit adultery, right? Obvious. But a man or woman choosing to be chesed will not be with another woman privately at all, and there are even some who will not even sit next to a woman. Sit next to a woman. They just won't do it. That's what we're talking about. Taking it up to the next level. When they're walking down the street, they are looking at the ground. They don't look around and observe because they don't want to look at other women. That's what a chesed does. Now, if they're doing it just because their buddies do it and they want to look like a chesed, that's not genuine. A true chesed is in for the love of Hashem, for the sake of heaven. I'm not even going to be looking at billboards and looking around because I want to avoid that at all cost. Because God says not to commit adultery, I'm not going to do anything that would even lead me to that place. And so that means when you're watching television, as soon as something comes on, you turn your head, guard your eyes, walk out of the room, turn it off. Whatever it is, that is a person who is attempting to be a chesed. Let's summarize this. Let me look through here and see if I've missed anything. So in summary, we learned that those who are pious without truly understanding the intended nature of Chassidus brings discredit to it, brings negativity to it. A true Chassid is one who loves Hashem with their whole heart and will do whatever it takes to endear yourself to the heart of Hashem like you would in any relationship that you have. There's seriousness behind it, but at the same time, you're not doing it just for restriction's sake. You're doing it because you know this makes Hashem happy. That's it. That concludes chapter 18, and we will be going into the elements of piety or chassidus in chapter 19. Questions? Fears, doubts, unbeliefs?
This kind of.
Yeah. I'm an amateur radio operator, and I've got a radio in there, and I forgot to turn it off. So, yeah. It is Morse code.
And it came in right when you needed it.
Yeah, I know it. It's funny.
Are you talking to Russia or something?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have a hobby, and my dear friends tell me that you need to have a hobby outside of your what you do for a living, and I just don't. I'm not a hobby guy. I don't golf. I don't do any of that stuff. So I decided to pick up my amateur radio stuff again and start doing it. Yeah. Get to talk all around the world and do all kinds of amazing communication things. It's good to know, in case of emergency especially. Speaking of that, I think what we're going to do here real soon is hold a preparedness class. So we can talk about what everybody in the community needs to do at minimum to be prepared for emergencies. Like right now, if there was an EMP set off, electromagnetic pulse bomb, means that everything that's electronic will no longer be able to be fried, right? Do you know how much food is in the city of Houston? If there was no more shipments of food, how many days of food left? In all the grocery stores, 4 days. 4 days. If the system is shut down and you can't order, no computers, all that stuff, 4 days. So at minimum, you should have probably 30 days of food in your house, at minimum. And even to start off basic, even if it's just beans and rice. I mean, you might get tired of it, but you won't starve. So anyway, you were getting ready to say something about the class.
Yeah, I'm glad because I passed. I was just, I don't know, I was almost brought to tears. Because going away these 3 weeks, you can really, leaving the community and everything, it's impossible. It's impossible. And now I see why
Right.
you kind of need.
They
why
cloister
people
together.
Stay together because it is.
It's impossible.
I couldn't do the stuff for him because I want him to have Shabbat. I want him,
Right.
Trying to do it for
Right.
him. We
Can't do it.
can't do it. So I'm like, it's so torn, and
Right.
that family, and so I'm like back to where I was, about feeling torn.
No, I know.
It's like, if you do this, you go ahead.
What do you choose?
I know you're choosing your family. I know it's your family over God, but God comes first. But shoot.
It is tough, and not only that, but you come back feeling spiritually zapped, like as if you just have to start over at zero again.
It's like today was refilled.
Right. No, you do, and spiritually, we all fight those things, but you could just do a simple test, and this is the simple test to find out where you're at on your connection to Hashem in this way. Take a week, and whatever you do to strengthen yourself spiritually, listen to lectures, for example, don't do it for a week. And you will, I turn into a complete retard spiritually. It makes me sick. And it's funny because I was talking to Richard about this Monday, and I'll get busy and my study schedule gets knocked off, right? And within 3 or 4 days, I feel horrible. I feel like a horrible, ungodly man. And I used to never ever feel that way. As a matter of fact, I could go months without even cracking a Bible or a book and not feel guilty about it at all. Don't even think about it.
Bill, have you read The World of the Bear?
No, I haven't read it yet.
The chapter about Mammon deals with when you come to a knowledge of the one true God, and you have to go back and deal with family who don't understand that. Excellent, excellent
Yeah.
chapter.
I'm still going through it. Yeah, I didn't even read the Torah the time you did. I carried it with me. I had it with me. But
Right.
It's like the timing is off. You don't have your quiet time in the morning. You know what I mean? It's
I know.
It's really, it's time.
Right.
Time is the thing.
Time is your relationship with Hashem.
Yeah.
It is. That is our relationship with Hashem. And if you don't get to spend that time, it's as if the person that you love the most, you've ignored.
That's so funny because when I was the kids and all that, I used to sit in my room and I was focusing
Yeah.
on the Bible. And I was focusing